My name is Bart Lennart. I am the Research and Learning Librarian for Philosophy and Education at the University of Calgary. This presentation will offer some philosophical musings on mental health and wellness in academic libraries. Mental Health Week has been recognized across Canada for over 70 years, since 1951. Yet mental health issues continue to be stigmatized. While there has been much more focus on wellness in the workplace in recent years, and while this focus has grown in importance and ubiquity during the pandemic, much more change needs to occur. As Greenwood and Anas explain, it's not enough to simply offer the latest apps or employ euphemisms like well-being or mental fitness. Employers must connect what they say to what they actually do. This presentation proposes an argument grounded in philosophical and psychological considerations for the conclusion that hybrid or flexible work schedules are one of a number of institutional policies that can positively influence mental health and increase the capacity for resilience among academic librarians and academic library staff more generally. To this end, this argument introduces the extended mind thesis and its tie to identity. It explores the centrality of agency and autonomy in mental and physical well-being, and utilizes the insight of the social model of disability in illuminating the connection between mental health and resilience and the importance of autonomy in choosing work environments. Let's turn to the extended mind thesis. Philosophers of mind and cognitive psychologists have been moving away from the idea that our minds, and thus ourselves, reside exclusively in the brain. The extended mind thesis, which was originally proposed by philosophers Andy Clark and David Chalmers nearly 25 years ago, has gained prominence in both philosophy and cognitive psychology, and the view is gaining mainstream appeal. So much so, in fact, that CBC's series Spark has been airing episodes focusing on this topic at least since 2017. So what is the extended mind thesis? In short, the theory argues that individual cognitive processes, which also include memory, can be socially manifested. And it's important to emphasize that memory is intimately related to an individual's identity. The extended mind thesis states that cognition literally extends beyond the skull. One very simple example of this is using paper and pencil to do long division. Some of the operations occur in the brain, but some of them are offloaded onto the paper, only to be then taken up again when the processes occurring in the brain have need of it. And this isn't just a case of offloading memory, since the operations themselves are performed on the paper. Other familiar examples that involve memory offloading are using our phones to remember phone numbers, or using calendars or agendas to remember important dates or appointments. For the sake of brevity, I'm not going to go into the philosophical argument for the extended mind thesis, but the Clark and Chalmers paper is very accessible for anyone interested in delving deeper into this idea. There are, however, other practical examples of how such cognitive offloading functions in the real world. Daniel Dennett, in his paper Making Things to Think With, argues that intelligence depends primarily on the natural habit of offloading many of our cognitive tasks onto our surrounding environments. He gives the example of elderly patients with Alzheimer's disease and other memory-related deficiencies who face great difficulties recalling and engaging in simple daily routines when they leave their homes and move to assisted living facilities. However, many of the symptoms of dementia become much less pronounced and in some cases disappear altogether when those individuals are returned to their homes, where they have offloaded many of their routines into their home environments. This includes family memories, which means that we literally imprint our identities onto the places and spaces we routinely inhabit. Similarly, families, friends, and other important acquaintances form a social environment onto which identities can be offloaded, which suggests that places, spaces, people, and familiar or significant objects have the power to maintain our personal identities. Even at times when the integrity of those identities is at risk due to illness, stress, or other external factors. Thus, I think it is fair to say that our work environments, or the surroundings where work takes place, as well as the people we build work relations with, are all part of who we are as professionals and contribute to how we offload our work-related cognitive tasks. This is precisely why, when the pandemic closures and work-from-home orders were implemented, one of the commonly reported work-related drawbacks of the closures was that the water cooler conversations and impromptu exchanges of ideas could not happen, and this resulted in the loss of opportunities for creative thinking, which is of great importance to academic work. On the flip side, however, many academics also reported an increase in productivity due to the absence of interruptions and other disruptive environmental occurrences. As senior leadership teams are trying to figure out the best ways to restructure workflow, it is important to keep in mind that returning to the pre-pandemic normal is not necessarily the most optimal course of action for the purposes of productivity or mental health. What is required is a balance between access to colleagues and personal office space, and the flexibility to remove oneself from one type of environment in favor of immersion into another, especially since so many of us have offloaded so much of our professional identity and creative routines into our home offices over the past couple of years. The mental health link in all this, however, has also to do with agency, our autonomy to choose between work environments depending on the purpose or function of the tasks and projects. Flexibility in choosing where and how work tasks are accomplished, of course within the functional limits of that task, can endow individuals with a sense of autonomy and agency, which is directly linked to health and mental flourishing. The Harvard psychologist Daniel Wagner argues that a feeling of agency produces beneficial health outcomes, and the health benefits of agency are still observed even in cases where the feeling of agency is mostly illusory. Wagner summarizes the results of two studies conducted by Langer and Rodin. According to the studies, elderly people given new control opportunities, even as insignificant as being responsible for watering a plant, displayed renewed resilience in psychological and physical well-being. Bullman and Workman also report that victims of paralyzing accidents who believed that their victimization was their own responsibility were more resilient in coping with the aftermath of their accident. Wagner explains that the habit of taking responsibility seemed to carry over from the accident into the pursuit of adjustment in the aftermath. It is reasonable for a person who perceives control in one area to suspect the possibility of such control in another. The feeling of agency is crucial, according to Wagner, to both human psychology and social life. He writes, "It is only with the feeling of conscious will that we can begin to solve the problems of knowing who we are as individuals, of discerning what we can and cannot do, and of judging ourselves morally right or wrong for what we have done." The feeling of agency, I think, can similarly be linked to our self-knowledge as professionals, and to how we conduct and evaluate our academic work and output. This includes not only having control as academics over the projects we pursue, but also control over the best suited workflow and the best suited location or environment for the completion of these projects. Long-standing conversations around well-being originating in the fields of psychiatry and disability studies offer yet another standpoint, which can be instructive as we collectively reimagine what shape wellness and mental health supports for academic librarians ought to take. The term medical model of disability was coined by psychiatrist Thomas Schatz in 1956, and it was within the psychiatry literature that the first critiques of this model were also developed. The medical model views individuals' disability first and foremost as the problem, and therefore calls for adjustment by people themselves. The disability rights activist Mike Oliver introduced the term social model of disability in 1983 to encompass the various criticisms of the medical model. The social model of disability focuses on structures and barriers that people experience rather than solely on the individuals themselves. For example, on the social model of disability, people who use wheelchairs as a means of locomotion do not have a disability in virtue of the fact that they cannot use their legs to move from place to place, but rather because barriers to locomotion exist in their environments. The disabling factor is a lack of elevator access or ramps or some other alternatives to stairs, rather than the fact that an individual has limited use of their legs. This, however, is not restricted to physical limitations. We are already quite sensitive to the need for safe spaces that are free of triggers for people suffering from trauma, for example. On the medical model, it's the traumatized person who needs to be fixed somehow. But on the social model, the fix takes place in the environment itself. Similarly, workplace burnout, productivity, resilience, and mental health more generally, in virtue of being so closely linked to the physical and social spaces, as the extended mind thesis tells us, are actually not problems the individual alone can fix, as the medical model would suggest. Resilience and mental health are intimately connected with the work environment too, and the insights derived from the social model suggest that accommodations should also take place on an environmental level. This does not, however, merely include the need for ergonomic workspaces, although those are very important, but it also calls for really rethinking flexibility and agency in workflow. Given the central role agency plays in the building of resilience and overall mental and physical well-being, providing employees with some amount of autonomy over their workflow and workplaces, and this includes location of work, can have a positive effect on mental health, as well as, I would argue, productivity and overall well-being. Academic librarians perform diverse functions, thereby requiring different institutional supports. While some stressors are shared by all employees, others are unique to the particular role of the librarian. Librarians working in academic libraries, therefore, not only encounter different barriers due to their unique personal circumstances, but also because the variety of functions cannot always be equally accommodated by the same overarching institutional structures. When the philosophical grounding of the social model is applied to the context of librarian well-being in academia, in conjunction with the insights of the extended mind thesis and its connection to identity formation, as well as the integral role agency plays in mental well-being, recovery and maintenance of resilience, the emerging vision for the promotion of mental health and wellness in the workplace ought to take the shape of highly flexible and individualized workplace policies responsive to individual needs within the bounds of their professional functions. What I have argued in this presentation is that individual productivity and well-being is intimately linked to our work environments, which are part of who we are as professionals, and that the organization of our work environments plays a crucial role in how well we perform in our professional roles, as well as how resilient we are to the challenges we face in our work, as well as in our personal lives, as the two are connected in virtue of the fact that our personal identity also tracks our professional identity, and resilience and well-being in the latter is dependent on resilience in the first. Moreover, because of the relationship of agency to our capacity for resilience and general well-being, control over our work environments is crucial to proper workplace flourishing. This control can take many different forms, including such simple things as the ability to organize and reorganize or personalize workstations, as well as, when functionally possible, to choose where and when one works. Hybrid work arrangements can go a long way toward ensuring the building of capacity for resilience and mental well-being. We are all different, and a one-size-fits-all model only serves a few, so flexibility ought to be built into workplace expectations and policies. Thank you for your time. All references to literature made in this presentation can be found on this slide.